Hey there, my name's Niandra. I want to talk about the Overwatch lore because even though I have over 1,000 hours in the game, it's not something that ever really clicked with me, and I'd like to explore why. Now, I'm probably going to get a couple of comments saying that Overwatch 2 will potentially fix issues I'm going to talk about, and it definitely could. That being said, we don't have a release date for it could be 2020 or even the year after. If you were a player who picked up the game in beta after seeing all the colourful characters, being asked to wait at least another year on top of 3 is kind of a lot. Just in general, Blizzard can't really afford to neglect Overwatch 1 with promises that things will get better in a year or two, because those who are already moderately unhappy with the state of the game aren't going to stick around that long. To start this video off on a positive note, I have nothing but praise for the animation teams and comic artists who have clearly put a lot of effort into their work, plus the accompanying music is usually great too. I also think Blizzard can do self-contained stories very well. While rewatching all the shorts, I especially like Junkertown the Plan and The Last Bastion with their focus on interaction between characters. Most importantly, if it is self-contained, it's enjoyable as a standalone and leaves you satisfied, which is more than I can say for a lot of Blizzard's other attempts to push the story forward. I think the greatest example of what I would consider unsatisfying is 2019's Storm Rising event. Now, this starts off cool, we see our 4 heroes beating up bad guys and working as a team, no problems here. My issue is that it ends on a sort of cliffhanger, and I feel like cliffhangers don't work when lore is drip-fed at such a slow pace. This event asked the audience more questions rather than tying up loose ends, and again, because lore is so slow-paced, we weren't short of questions we needed answered. Basically, how could I bring myself to care about this when I had no idea when I'd get a conclusion? And that to me is absolutely the biggest issue with Overwatch lore. It's scarce but jumps around a lot. There's a tendency to introduce something new each time we're given lore, and whether it acknowledges what we've been previously given seems to just be a coin flip. As I made this video, I did lots of research, and there's articles from past years that discuss how Overwatch as a universe has barely moved forward since initial release, and it's criticism that's still valid today. I feel like the lore is overly ambitious. The Blizzard want to tell a story about a grand universe with huge stakes, but so far haven't been able to dedicate the time and effort needed to achieve something so big. Outside of the heroes, this universe is arguably still pretty empty. And honestly, I have sympathy for Blizzard here because they've given themselves a real hard job by going down the serious plot route. Remember that Overwatch was originally an MMO called Titan, a genre more commonly given world and character building. We also have an ever-growing cast of over 20 characters, and we need to understand a hero or villain's motivations for doing something, otherwise their actions are meaningless. Plus, a lot of people want each hero to be fairly represented to break away from stereotypes, which I understand. Like, it kinda sucks to be a Lucio main whose lore is primarily a cereal box. Blizzard's method of offering a mixture of backstory and narrative has also led to some heroes being way more developed than others. For example, compare all the information we have on Genji to Zenyatta, whose measly 2 paragraphs can be summed up by he's a monk, he's big into positive vibes, and he was a mentor to Genji. That last one encompasses so much of Zenyatta's backstory that it's almost like he's an accessory to Genji rather than his own character. About a year back, there was also some confusion over D.Va being a StarCraft pro, what with a now deleted blog article and an interview with Jeff Kaplan referencing it. Michael Chu later tweeted that this was simply a misconception and eventually made a forum post trying to clear things up. I don't know, this kinda leaves a bad taste in my mouth as it feels like borderline disrespectful to the fans, and it also vaguely implies that the writers and devs don't actually talk to each other. I'd also say D.Va is one of the lesser developed characters, so it shouldn't be surprising if people cling on to what little they were given. Another thought I have is, if they're willing to retcon something so minor, then surely no other lore is really safe or defined. What I would have loved to have seen earlier than Overwatch 2 is something similar to Rainbow Six Siege, where there's a tab called Bio on the operator screen, which is basically the game's equivalent to the hero gallery. Alongside an image of the character, you're also given a huge paragraph of text split into sections such as background, psychological report, and notes. Recently, notes have been written from the perspective of another character, which I think is pretty neat. For example, Alibi's notes are written by Echo, establishing a connection between the two, even if it's to only share how her gadget works. Imagine Zenyatta's notes being written from the perspective of Genji, giving us his side of their relationship, or someone else to establish more connections. In general, I feel there's a lot of information missing from the in-game client. For example, there's the F1 menu that describes abilities without telling you the exact number of damage or healing they do, and how Valkyrie's description is just enhances all abilities. Basically, there's a lot that Overwatch makes you Google that could have just been included with it. There's tiny snippets of lore you can easily miss because it was mentioned in a tweet or a cookbook you didn't know existed, which makes an already fairly inaccessible story even more so. Also remember that most in-game attempts to progress the lore forward have been limited time events like Archives, Retribution and Storm Rising. These pop up for a few weeks once a year and that's it. I know there's tons of reasons why it's in Blizzard's best interest for them to be time sensitive, but it's still unfriendly towards those looking to explore the lore further. To be fair, some skins do get a couple of sentences about lore, which I think is a nice addition, but I also think it could be taken further. Also, why did Baptiste's Combat Medic skin get text while Mercy's recent Dr. Ziggler didn't? The other thing is, if Overwatch gets basic character backstory out of the way, then they can focus more on the bigger plots they seemingly want to tell, and I think this will be the greatest benefit of Overwatch 2. We can stop explaining the past and look at the present or future events. We can explore more stories than just repeated rehashes of, oh, there's an attack, we gotta help some people, we saved the day, the world needs more heroes, which is a phrase I feel kinda disillusioned towards after stuff that's happened this year. Although Blizzard have said that lore is important to Overwatch, the cynical side of me wonders if it's primarily just a marketing tool, like many of the heroes look like they could have been designed with cosplay or fan art in mind. It kind of feels like they released Recall and a lot of people became interested in the game due to the character potential, but then Blizzard or Activision realised there's a lot more money in esports, placing lore on a sort of back burner until the announcement of Overwatch 2. I have said this before, but I personally feel like Blizzard have always tried to cater to both casual fans and esports players, and by trying to please all, they just end up with everyone unhappy because neither side gets the full attention it needs to completely flourish. Personally, I'm kinda struggling to get excited for Overwatch 2 because the last 3 years of lore hasn't really captivated me. I know I'm not the only one who feels worried about where the first game is headed right now. There's definite concerns of game balance being neglected as developers put more focus into Overwatch 2, something that might not mean much to a person who just wants to grind ranked. It is absolutely clear that Blizzard want Overwatch to be this huge thing, with millions pumped into a manufactured worldwide esports league, a wide range of merchandise for sale, and hell, even a cameo of Tracer in Ready Player One, and now a sort of sequel. There is clear indication that Blizzard want widespread cultural relevance, and as someone who loves the game, I want nothing more for them to achieve it. But I also know this game's first purpose is to make money. By keeping that in mind, maybe the best solution is to probably just appreciate Overwatch for what it is, not what it could be. And that's all from me. I didn't cover a lot of topics like shipping and representation simply because I just didn't feel qualified to speak about it. So yeah, thank you so much for watching, feel free to check out my Patreon, and have a nice day.